What's going on, everyone? Honda Fit for Adventure here, and today we'll be removing and reinstalling the factory radio on a third generation Honda Fit. Now this is the base model, so if you have a higher trim with the lane assist cameras, the removal process should be roughly the same, but you will have to unplug an extra cable or two. In my next video, I will be installing an Android Auto head unit, and there's a lot of information to cover, so for today, we'll just be focusing on the radio removal and reinstallation. To remove your factory radio, you will need a plastic trim removal tool, a Phillips head screwdriver or 8mm socket, and a few small flathead screwdrivers or something similar in shape. The total removal time should take about 30 minutes, so let's get started. First, we're going to remove the plastic trim around the gauge cluster. There are 4 push-in tabs securing the trim to the gauge cluster, 2 at the top and 2 at the bottom. I had luck by taking my trim removal tool and starting at the top right. Once I got the trim popped loose, I wiggled my fingers in and I pulled on or near the tab locations, pulling them out one at a time. With the gauge cluster trim removed, we can now work on the silver trim that goes around the air vent. There are 7 tabs in total, 3 at the top and 3 at the bottom. I started at the top left and worked my way clockwise around the trim. Once again, I'm pulling on or near the tab locations, and I'm pulling with my fingers, not my whole hand. Let's say that one more time. Pull with your fingers and not with your hands. With the vent trim removed, we can now remove the HVAC vents. There are 4 push-in tabs on the top and 3 plastic clips along the bottom edge. The push-in tabs on the top are pretty hard to access unless you have a long enough and skinny enough flathead screwdriver. Here's my workaround on how to remove the vent. Take the 2 to 3 smaller flathead screwdrivers and insert them into the tiny holes along the bottom edge of the vent. Gently lift up on the first 2 screwdrivers, and this should lift the vent up and over the plastic tabs, loosening up the vent. With the vent loose, stick your finger into the small hole located on the top left and pull up and out and slightly to the right. I think this was the hardest part and the part that was skipped over in other YouTube videos. Next, we'll need to remove 2 screws with a Phillips head screwdriver or an 8mm socket. Now there is a 3rd screw underneath the radio securing it in place, and in order to get to that screw, we have to remove the accessory panel first. To remove the accessory panel, start by removing the Phillips head screw. With the screw removed, you can use a plastic trim removal tool or use your fingers to pop off the accessory panel. Now this is where I would recommend to unplug your accessory ports to remove the panel and give yourself a bit more room to work with. But as you can tell, my accessory panel has been modified a bit, so I'm going to leave everything connected. The screw that we want to remove is about
right here. So we're gonna go in with the camera.
You can see the third screw that we need to remove by looking up and to the left underneath the accessory panel.
It is a 8mm or Phillips head screw. It's a bit hard to film with the camera.
Some users have reported that this screw is on the passenger side and they would have to remove the glove box to access the screw. This was not the case for me.
It's in my hand, but I don't want to drop it. There we go.
With the last screw removed, it's time to pop out the radio. There's going to be 8 tabs securing the radio in place. 3 on the top, 3 on the bottom, and 1 on the middle of each side. Once again, we're going to pull back on or near the tabs by pulling with our fingers and not our hands. The radio is secured pretty good, but I had some luck pulling at the top center or the top right corner. With the radio free, we can now unplug it from the car's wiring harness. Start by unplugging the airbag and hazard light. Now let's remove the rest of the plugs. A flathead screwdriver is definitely helpful for some of these. Once all the plugs have been disconnected, that's it. You have now successfully removed your factory radio. As I was saying earlier, I will be installing an Android Auto head unit in my next video, but for today, I will be reinstalling the factory radio. To reinstall the radio, reconnect all the plug connections and slide it back into place. Push in around the edges of the radio, making sure to pop in all the tabs back into place. Reinsert the 2 Phillips head screws or 8mm bolts back at the top. And don't forget to reinsert the 3rd screw at the bottom of the radio. Once the third screw is back in, you can plug back in your accessories, reattach the accessory panel, and secure it in place with the Phillips head screw. Now let's slide the air vent back into place and secure it down by pushing in around the edges, securing the tabs back into place. With the air vent reattached, let's put the silver trim piece back on. Now you can probably snap it back on in one place or take your time with it and work your way around the edges. After the silver trim has been reinstalled around the vent, it's time to reinstall the gauge cluster trim. Place the lower portion of the gauge trim in location first, and then push down on the tabs to secure the trim in place. That's it. You have now successfully removed and reinstalled the factory radio on a third generation Honda Fit. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, because next week we'll be installing an Android Auto radio. Stay tuned and stay fit.